This is week 2 lecture, part 2, and I will be covering the 4 phases of emergency management. Moving on to the phases of emergency management, as I mentioned, there are 4 of them, and you must know them. They are mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. And for the sake of full disclosure, I think it's important to note that simply Googling phases of emergency management may result in a number of different answers, as indicated by this graphic I have here, that even within the government you can see that there are many different models that have been published. So on the left there you've got the ESF1, the Emergency Support Function Number 1, out of the Transportation Annex, lists 5 different ones. There's a document from the NRF that lists 5, and those aren't the same as the other 5, and 4 and 4 and 3. I know that there are a lot of different lists of information that may hit on the search for something like the phases of emergency management. You need to know that the 4 that I'm giving you is the most commonly accepted and understood phases. So be aware that there are others, but know the 4 that are being presented. They are the most commonly accepted 4. And the first of the 4 is mitigation. Mitigation refers to activities that reduce or even eliminate risks to people or property. Some disasters are avoided entirely if appropriate mitigation techniques are used. It also refers to the minimization of the consequences of an incident. Many emergencies certainly are not avoidable, including the effects of those, but often we realize that we could have taken measures to reduce the negative effect of the crisis. Good mitigation strategies identify those measures before the emergency occurs. What you're looking at here is a tornado that took place in Newcastle, Oklahoma in 1999. The tornado produced winds that exceeded 250 miles per hour. There was an estimated $1.5 billion in damage done, with 1,700 homes, 85 businesses, 3 churches, and 2 schools being destroyed or damaged. Worst of all is that 85 people were killed during this natural disaster. And sadly, lives may have been saved if there had been an adequate tornado shelter available. What resulted was a cooperative effort of the city and state governments, along with FEMA, to create just such a tornado shelter. The lot was carefully chosen that was near the police department and a school. An architect was selected that could conform to FEMA standards, and the shelter was erected. It was designed to have a safe method of exit, including doors with triple hinges that swung inward instead of outward. Signage was also added that is able to clearly direct people to the shelter during severe weather. During subsequent drills, the community was able to get 850 students and other citizens inside the shelter in just 5 minutes. This is an example of the type of project that an emergency manager is involved in, from securing funding to coordinating with FEMA to ensure the successful completion of the enterprise. In this case, it is an actual structure that is being designed to mitigate the consequences of an emergency. Next is preparedness, and preparedness is a range of tasks and activities to build, sustain, and improve the operational capability to prevent, protect against, respond to, and recover from crises. It involves all levels of government, private and non-governmental organizations, and this is where you identify threats and try to figure out vulnerabilities and what resources you have available to yourself. So ultimately, the question that preparedness asks is, when the next one happens, are we in a position to address it? Are we ready? Do we have what we need? Now, I will say that there is a little bit of overlap between mitigation and preparedness, but that's the important question that preparedness seeks to answer. Preparedness would include perhaps a review of your emergency operations plan, your EOP, also predetermining evacuation routes and stocking up on food and water. Preparedness includes making preparations that would assist responders whether it's making sure that you have the necessary facilities ready for action when the emergency happens, or facilitating all of the necessary training. As its name indicates, preparedness means that these measures are thoughtfully planned and executed before an emergency takes place. The third phase is response, and occurs when the emergency is imminent or shortly after it has begun. As noted here, it encompasses the activities that address short-term direct effect of an incident. And this is where your EOP is actually put to work. And it's when you're exercising that and executing that EOP, the whole concept is to limit loss of life and try to mitigate those negative consequences. So this is where all your preparedness plans are put to work. Your EOP comes to life, and all the parts and pieces of your plan, the emergency manager's plan, gets put to the test, and training exercise become life-saving tasks to be accomplished. Finally is recovery. And obviously the goal of recovery is to return the community to its normal operations. And here we have a list, not a comprehensive list, of the areas that recovery frequently touches on. They're not in any particular order of priority, but this is common in the recovery effort. And the emergency manager is also integral in identifying financial sources that will help make this recovery effort a reality. As part of the National Disaster Recovery Framework, FEMA has invested millions of dollars in teams of people across the nation to assist with long-term recovery. This graphic illustrates the proportion of events that have been supported by long-term community recovery activities from 2004 to 2011. It's fascinating to see that of those, flooding had such a significant percentage of the crises. And that officially brings us to the conclusion of the lecture.